Hey there, wannabe princess. You think wearing fake dog tags and a military shirt is gonna fool us?
Staff Sergeant Reynolds snarled as he forced Sabrina Matthews to her knees in the middle of the Coronado Naval Base parking lot. The morning drizzle created glistening droplets on the cold concrete beneath her. Two military police officers stood behind her, hands resting on their weapons, ready for any sudden movement. "Cuff her," Reynolds ordered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Another civilian who thinks she's clever, impersonating a Navy SEAL for attention." As they pulled Sabrina's arms behind her back, the morning light caught her left forearm. A complex tattoo emerged from beneath her sleeve. Scales of justice held by an angel, wings spread wide, stern face looking down. The detail was exquisite, every line etched with precision in black and gray ink. Lieutenant Parker, observing from a distance, suddenly went rigid. He had seen that tattoo somewhere before. His heart began pounding as old memories flooded back. "You're making a mistake," Sabrina said quietly, her eyes focused on the puddles, reflecting the gray sky above. Reynolds laughed harshly. "Right, we always make mistakes. You and how many other fraudsters think you can abuse the honor of the SEALs." But within the next 20 minutes, when those worn dog tags were scanned through the identification system, everyone would understand exactly who they had just arrested. And the story behind that tattoo would turn the entire Coronado base upside down. The escort into the base was a parade of humiliation. Reynolds kept up a steady stream of criticism about fake SEALs, while Sabrina walked silently between the MPs, her cuffed hands behind her back, making her appear smaller, more vulnerable. Other personnel stopped to stare at the unusual sight of a woman in civilian clothes being arrested on base. "Move along, people," Reynolds barked. "Just another wannabe getting what she deserves." The interrogation room was sterile, under harsh fluorescent lighting. Captain Morrison had just entered the building when he caught sight of the procession. His eyes immediately locked onto Sabrina's exposed tattoo, and his face went pale. He quickly composed himself, but not before Lieutenant Parker noticed the reaction. "What's wrong, sir?" Parker asked, moving closer to Morrison. "Nothing, Lieutenant. Just another routine case," Morrison replied too quickly, his voice tight with barely controlled tension. The interrogation room felt like an icebox. Reynolds slammed Sabrina's bag onto the steel table with deliberate force, the contents spilling out. Among the items were the dog tags, two pieces of worn metal that would soon change everything. "SEAL shirt, fake ID, and dog tags too," Reynolds said, picking up the metal pieces with obvious disdain. "You really went all out with this fantasy, didn't you?" He held the tags up to the light, squinting at the faded engraving. "Operation Whisper, Unit 09. Probably got these from some surplus store." Technician Brooks was setting up the scanning equipment when Sabrina's tactical awareness became apparent. Despite being cuffed, she systematically observed each piece of equipment, noting placement, functionality, and potential weaknesses. Her eyes moved with the precision of someone trained to assess threats and opportunities. "Ma'am, please state your full name for the record," Brooks said, adjusting his computer screen. "Sabrina Matthews, civilian contractor," she replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Contractor for what? Costume parties? If you're already feeling that fire in your chest watching Sabrina get disrespected like this, smash that like button right now. And hit subscribe, because stories like this, where everything you think you know gets turned upside down, that's what we do here." Quick question while we're diving into this incredible story. Where in the world are you watching from? I'm genuinely curious about our amazing community. Drop your country in the comments. Captain Morrison entered the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was a tall man with graying temples and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. But when his eyes fell on Sabrina's tattoo again, something flickered across his features. Recognition mixed with something that looked almost like fear. "What do we have here, Sergeant?" Morrison asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Civilian impersonating military personnel, sir. Pretty standard case, though she's got quite the elaborate setup." Reynolds gestured toward the dog tags. "Even has fake operation tags." Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see. Well, let's not waste too much time on this. Process her quickly and move on." But Captain Wells chose that moment to enter the room. Wells was known throughout the base as a fair but thorough investigator, someone who didn't take shortcuts when it came to military justice. His eyes immediately went to the tattoo on Sabrina's arm, and unlike Morrison, he didn't try to hide his interest. That's quite a detailed piece of artwork, Wells observed, moving closer to examine the scales of justice held by the angel. Professional work. Expensive too, I'd imagine. Probably spent her welfare check on it, Reynolds sneered. Wells ignored the comment, instead focusing on Sabrina. Where did you get this tattoo done? Afghanistan, Sabrina replied simply. The room went quiet. Afghanistan wasn't exactly a tourist destination known for its tattoo parlors. Morrison stepped forward quickly. This case is straightforward, Captain Wells. No need to complicate things with unnecessary details. But Wells wasn't easily deterred. Actually, Captain Morrison, I think we should be thorough. Military impersonation is a serious federal crime. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Lieutenant Parker had been studying Sabrina's face with growing intensity. Something about her profile, the way she carried herself despite being restrained, triggered memories he couldn't quite place. The Justice Unit tattoo was familiar, but from where? Do you know what SEAL training involves? Reynolds asked mockingly. Do you have any idea how brutal it is? How many men wash out in the first week alone? Sabrina remained silent, her eyes fixed on a point on the wall behind Reynolds' head. I asked you a question, Reynolds pressed, leaning forward aggressively. I heard you, Sabrina replied quietly. Her calm response seemed to infuriate Reynolds more than any argument would have. He was used to intimidating people, used to his physical presence and rank breaking down resistance. But this small woman just sat there, absorbed his aggression like a sponge absorbing water. Brooks finished setting up the scanner and prepared to run the dog tags through the system. This should tell us everything we need to know about these, he said, holding up the metal pieces. The first scan attempt failed. The machine beeped once, displayed an error message, then went silent. Must be a glitch, Brooks muttered, adjusting the settings and trying again. The second attempt produced the same result. Morrison watched the process with growing tension, his hands clasped behind his back in a parade rest position that didn't quite hide their trembling. Maybe the tags are too old or damaged, Reynolds suggested. Fake ones probably don't scan properly anyway. But Brooks was persistent. He cleaned the scanner lens, recalibrated the system, and prepared for a third attempt. These machines are designed to read tags that have been through combat zones. Age and wear shouldn't be an issue. Captain Wells moved closer to observe the process. His trained eye had noticed something about the serial numbers on the tags. They followed a format he recognized but couldn't immediately place. Those numbers, Wells said slowly, that's not a standard format for current operations. Because they're fake, Reynolds insisted. Actually, Wells continued, that format was used for classified operations in the early 2000s. Very specific operations. Morrison's face had gone from pale to ashen. Captain Wells, perhaps we should... His words were cut off by a loud beeping from the scanner. The screen flashed red, then displayed a message that made everyone in the room freeze. Access denied, classified level Omega. The silence that followed this was deafening. Even Reynolds stopped his constant commentary, staring at the screen in disbelief. Level Omega? Brooks whispered. That's above my clearance level. That's above almost everyone's clearance level. Parker felt his knees go weak. Level Omega classification was reserved for the most sensitive military operations, the kind that officially didn't exist. He had only heard rumors of such classifications during his time in special operations. Morrison moved quickly toward the scanner. Obviously a system malfunction. These old machines glitch all the time. Sir, with respect, Brooks replied, this is a brand new system. We just installed it last month. It's specifically designed to handle classified materials. Wells pulled out his secure phone and began making a call. I need to contact base security. This is beyond our normal protocols. That won't be necessary, Morrison said sharply. This is clearly a false positive. The woman is obviously a civilian with fake credentials. But Wells was already speaking into his phone. This is Captain Wells. I need immediate classification verification for level Omega materials. Yes, I understand the security protocols. During the early stages of interrogation, Sabrina was processed using advanced military medical equipment designed for identification and health assessment. These sophisticated biometric scanners utilized precision laser technology and high-pressure sensors, capable of reading fingerprints even when damaged or obscured. The military encrypted database systems connected to classified data repositories, ensuring absolute security for sensitive information. These scanning devices, originally developed for battlefield identification, could maintain perfect accuracy even under extreme conditions where standard civilian electronics would completely fail. Reynolds was pacing now, his confidence shaken by the scanner results. This is impossible. She's obviously just some delusional civilian with good fake documents. Then explain the Omega classification, Wells challenged. System error has to be. Parker finally found his voice. Sergeant Reynolds, what if it's not an error? What if those tags are real? Don't be ridiculous, Lieutenant. Look at her. Does she look like a SEAL to you? But Parker was looking at her, really looking, and what he saw was troubling his assumptions. Despite being cuffed and surrounded by hostile personnel, Sabrina showed no signs of stress or fear. Her breathing was controlled, her posture alert but relaxed. She observed everything while appearing to observe nothing. Let's try a different approach, Wells suggested. Ma'am, you said you were a civilian contractor. What kind of contracting work do you do? Consulting, Sabrina replied. What kind of consulting? The kind that requires security clearances. It was the first time she had hinted at anything beyond the civilian story, and it sent a ripple of tension through the room. Morrison stepped forward aggressively. Enough games. Process her for impersonation, and let's move on. We're wasting valuable time on obvious fraud. Actually, Wells said, ending his phone call, base security is sending someone down to verify these tags. They want to run additional tests. That's completely unnecessary, Morrison protested. With respect, Captain, Omega-level classifications are above both our pay grades. Protocol requires verification by higher authority. The door opened, and Sergeant Davis entered, carrying additional scanning equipment. Davis was a veteran with over 20 years of service, someone who had seen everything the military had to offer. But when his eyes fell on Sabrina's tattoo, he stopped dead in his tracks. Holy cow, Davis breathed, staring at the scales of justice held by the angel. Justice Unit. The words hit the room like a bomb blast. Parker spun around, his face going white. Morrison took an involuntary step backward. Even Reynolds, who had been so confident moments before, seemed suddenly uncertain. What did you say? Parker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That tattoo, Davis said, pointing with a trembling finger. Only Justice Unit personnel carried those. The scales of justice with the angel wings. It was their identifier. Wells looked from Davis to Parker. Justice Unit? I've never heard of that designation. Because it was classified, Parker said, his voice gaining strength. Black Ops. They handled sensitive situations. War crimes investigations, internal security threats, operations that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Morrison was backing toward the door. This is all speculation. We need to stick to facts. The facts, Davis continued, are that Justice Unit was disbanded 5 years ago. Operation Whisper was their last mission. Afghanistan 2019. Entire unit was declared KIA. Sabrina spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Declared, past tense, not confirmed. The tension is building, and we're just getting started. If you're loving these military stories of hidden identity and justice, there's a lot more coming. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the next reveal is going to blow your mind completely. The room's atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What had started as a routine impersonation case was becoming something much more complex and dangerous. Wells was making additional phone calls, his voice low and urgent. Morrison looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world beginning to collapse. Let's take this step by step, Wells said, ending his latest call. Ma'am, you claim to be a civilian contractor, but you have dog tags from a classified operation, a tattoo associated with a disbanded Black Ops unit, and clearance levels that most people in this room can't access. Would you care to explain? Sabrina looked directly at him for the first time, and Wells felt a chill run down his spine. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held depths he couldn't fathom. Some explanations require proper authorization, she said simply. What kind of authorization? The kind that Captain Morrison is trying very hard to prevent you from obtaining. All eyes turned to Morrison, who had gone from pale to red in the span of seconds. That's completely unfounded. I'm following standard protocol. Standard protocol, Sabrina continued, her voice remaining calm, would be to verify the tags immediately. Standard protocol would be to contact Justice Unit Command. Standard protocol would not involve trying to rush through an impersonation charge. Wells pulled out his phone again. I'm calling Justice Unit Command. Justice Unit was disbanded, Morrison said quickly. There is no command. Then who classified those dog tags at Omega level? Wells challenged. Morrison had no answer for that. Parker was studying Sabrina with increasing intensity. Something about her profile, the way she moved despite the restraints, was triggering memories he had tried to bury. Justice Unit had been his first assignment out of special operations training. They had worked on cases that officially never happened, investigated crimes that couldn't be acknowledged, pursued justice in places where conventional military law couldn't reach. The bombing, Parker said suddenly. Operation Whisper, Helmand Province. Intelligence suggested a weapons cache, but it was a trap. The entire team was caught in a coordinated explosion. 6 operatives went in, Davis added quietly. None came out. Bodies were recovered 3 days later. All bodies? Sabrina asked. Davis paused. Well, the report said, I asked about bodies, not reports. The distinction hung in the air like smoke. Reports could be falsified. Bodies were harder to fake. Wells was back on his phone, this time with someone who clearly outranked everyone in the room. His side of the conversation consisted mainly of, yes, sir, and I understand, sir, and right away, sir. When he ended the call, his expression had changed completely. Ma'am, he said to Sabrina, I've just been informed that this case is being transferred to higher authority. We're to secure you and wait for further instructions. What kind of higher authority? Reynolds asked. The kind with stars on their collar and clearances that make Omega look like public information. Morrison made his move then, grabbing the dog tags from the scanner with sudden desperation. This is nonsense. These are obviously fake. I'm ending this charade right now. He strode quickly to the small fireplace in the corner of the room, where a maintenance fire was burning to keep the chill off. Without hesitation, he threw the dog tags into the flames. Destroy these fake evidences, he shouted. No more time wasted on obvious fraud. Sabrina's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She lunged forward as much as her restraints would allow, crying out, No, those are my father's. The anguish in her voice seemed genuine, heartbreaking. She struggled against the handcuffs, apparently desperate to save the burning metal pieces. Morrison stepped back, satisfaction clear on his face. No more fake evidence to waste our time with. Wells looked at him with disgust. Captain Morrison, what the hell do you think you're doing? Those were potential evidence in a federal investigation. Evidence of fraud, Morrison replied. Nothing more. Wells moved quickly to the fireplace, using a poker to retrieve the dog tags from the flames. They were glowing red-hot, but clearly intact. Dog tags are made from stainless steel, Captain, Wells said coldly. Fire can't destroy them. Any military officer should know that. He held up the tags, still smoking, but with the serial numbers clearly visible. Raven, Whisper 09. Morrison's face went through several color changes as he realized his mistake. The tags weren't destroyed. If anything, the heat had cleaned them, making the engraving more visible than before. Sabrina stopped her apparent distress and straightened up. Her demeanor completely changed. Thank you for testing their durability, she said calmly. Parker stared at her in shock. You knew they would survive. Stainless steel melts at 2,912 degrees Fahrenheit, Sabrina replied. That fireplace reaches maybe 800 degrees on a good day. The transformation was stunning. One moment she had been a desperate woman trying to save precious mementos. The next she was someone with technical knowledge and complete emotional control. Wells read the serial numbers aloud. Raven, Whisper 09. Raven, Davis whispered. That was Justice Unit's sniper designation. The best marksman they ever had. Morrison's hands were shaking now. He had just been outmaneuvered by someone he thought was a helpless civilian, and the implications were starting to sink in. Wells was already pulling up classified databases on his secure terminal. Within minutes, he had located files that made his eyes widen. Operation Whisper, he read from the screen. Justice Unit 09, mission date, August 12, 2019. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Mission status, all personnel KIA. He looked up at Sabrina. But if you're Raven and you're here, then the KIA report was fabricated, she finished. Parker felt the room spinning around him. He had attended the memorial service for Justice Unit. He had watched as an honor guard folded flags for families who had lost everything. He had believed, for 5 years, that his colleagues were dead. This is impossible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. A lot of impossible things become possible, Sabrina replied. when people have something to hide. Wells was deep in the classified files now, his security clearance allowing him access to materials that most people would never see. What he found there made him reach for his secure phone again. "Sir, this is Captain Wells at Coronado. I need to speak with someone about Operation Whisper." "Yes, I'll hold." Morrison was backing toward the door again, but this time Davis moved to block his path. "Where are you going, Captain?" Davis asked. I need to make some calls, report this development." "I think you'll want to stick around," Wells said, still holding his phone. "I have a feeling there are going to be some very interesting questions coming your way." The mystery of Sabrina's true identity was about to be revealed, and everyone in the room sensed they were standing at the edge of something much larger than a simple impersonation case. The dog tags that Morrison had tried to destroy now glowed like evidence in the afternoon light, their survival a testament to truths that couldn't be burned away. Financial systems within the military were now activated due to Sabrina's identity discovery. Operatives like her required specialized insurance packages for high-risk missions, with coverage extending to millions of dollars for classified situations. Offshore investment funds and cryptocurrency wallets were commonly used to protect assets from hostile organizations, while ensuring families received financial protection if operatives disappeared or were declared KIA. These sophisticated financial instruments, developed specifically for military contractors operating in dangerous environments, included provisions for situations exactly like Sabrina's, where official death certificates needed to be maintained for operational security while ensuring continued financial support. "Ma'am," Wells said, having ended his phone call, "I've just spoken with someone who remembers Operation Whisper very well. He's asking me to confirm something." Sabrina looked at him with those storm gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "He wants to know if you have any distinguishing marks or scars that would confirm your identity." Sabrina held up her hands, showing the backs where the skin was marked with old burn scars. "Fire immunity from bomb disposal training," she said simply, along with some other souvenirs from Afghanistan. The evidence was mounting, but Wells needed one more confirmation. He pulled up a photograph on his secure terminal, grainy and partially obscured, but clearly showing 6 figures in tactical gear. "This was taken 3 days before Operation Whisper began," he said, turning the screen toward Sabrina. "Can you identify anyone in this photo?" Sabrina studied the image for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of loss that hadn't been there before. "Rodriguez, Martinez, Thompson, Chen, Williams, and me." Parker had moved close enough to see the photo, and his face had gone white. "Those are Justice Unit call signs," he whispered. "But you said your name was Matthews." "Matthews is my real name," Sabrina replied. "Raven was my operational designation." Wells was back on his phone, this time speaking in rapid, urgent tones. When he finished the call, he looked around the room with an expression of someone who had just received orders he didn't quite believe. "Ma'am," he said formally, "I've been instructed to remove your restraints and extend the formal apologies of the United States Navy for the treatment you've received today." Reynolds, who had been silent for the past several minutes, finally found his voice. "Sir, are you saying she's actually—" "I'm saying," Wells interrupted, "that we have just spent the morning interrogating someone who died for her country and came back to life. Someone who has clearances that make mine look like a library card. Someone who has apparently been investigating matters that are well above our pay grade." He moved to unlock Sabrina's handcuffs personally. "Ma'am, is there anything we can do to make this right?" Sabrina rubbed her wrists where the metal had left marks, but her expression remained controlled. "You can start by arresting Captain Morrison for conspiracy to commit treason against a classified operation." Morrison made a desperate lunge for the door, but Davis was ready for him. The older sergeant might have been past his physical prime, but he had spent 20 years dealing with people who thought they could run from military justice. "Going somewhere, Captain?" Davis asked, easily blocking Morrison's path. Wells was already on his radio, calling for additional security. "This is Captain Wells. I need MPs to the interrogation room immediately. We have a potential flight risk." "We're at the halfway point, and things are about to explode. If this story has you completely hooked, share it with someone who loves military justice stories. The next few minutes are going to change everything we thought we knew about Sabrina." Morrison's facade cracked completely. The confident officer who had tried to bury the investigation was replaced by a panicked man who realized his world was collapsing. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "Operation Whisper was classified for good reasons. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal. What truths? Wells demanded. The kind that get people killed, the kind that destroy careers and topple governments. Sabrina stood slowly, her movements controlled, despite having been restrained for hours. For the first time since her arrest, she looked like what she truly was, a warrior who had survived impossible odds. The truth, she said quietly, is that Operation Whisper wasn't a mission failure. It was a betrayal. The words hit the room like a physical force. Parker, who had believed for 5 years that his colleagues had died in an enemy ambush, felt everything he thought he knew shifting beneath his feet. Betrayal by whom? Wells asked. Morrison laughed bitterly. You want to know? You really want to know? Operation Whisper was investigating weapons sales to enemy forces. Someone was selling American military equipment to insurgents, and Justice Unit was getting too close to the truth. So you killed them, Sabrina said, her voice carrying no emotion at all. We didn't have a choice. The investigation would have destroyed half the command structure in Afghanistan. Good men would have gone down for trying to stay alive in an impossible situation. Wells was recording everything now, his phone capturing Morrison's confession. You're admitting to murdering 6 American service members? We told ourselves they were acceptable casualties, Morrison continued, apparently beyond caring about the consequences of his words. The greater good required sacrifice. Parker found his voice again. You son of a... You let us hold memorial services. You let families grieve. You let the entire unit believe they had failed in their duty. It was the only way to keep the truth buried. Sabrina moved closer to Morrison, and despite being smaller than him by several inches, her presence seemed to fill the room. The truth, she said, is that 5 good people died because you decided their lives were worth less than your careers. 5, Morrison repeated. Not 6. You survived. I survived, she confirmed, and I've spent the last 5 years gathering evidence. She reached into her back pocket and withdrew a small device that had somehow escaped detection during her arrest. It looked like a standard smartphone, but Wells recognized it as something much more sophisticated. Every conversation you've had about Operation Whisper for the past 18 months, Sabrina said, activating the device. Every meeting where you discussed keeping the truth buried. Every decision to let families suffer while you protected your conspiracy. Morrison's face had gone beyond pale to gray. That's not possible. Our communications are secure. Your communications use military encryption, Sabrina replied. Justice Unit developed most of those encryption protocols. We know how to break them. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the hallway as MPs responded to Wells's call. But before they could arrive, the main door burst open to admit someone whose presence changed the entire dynamic of the room. Commander Rhodes entered like a force of nature. He was a large man with steel gray hair and enough ribbons on his chest to indicate decades of distinguished service. But it was his bearing that commanded attention. This was someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. His eyes swept the room, taking in Morrison's panicked expression, the MPs preparing to make an arrest, and finally settling on Sabrina. "Raven," he said simply. "Commander Rhodes," she replied with equal formality. Rhodes looked around the room again, his gaze lingering on each person present. "Gentlemen, you've just participated in the conclusion of a 5-year investigation into one of the most serious betrayals in modern military history." He gestured toward Morrison. "Captain Morrison has been under surveillance since he returned from Afghanistan. We've been waiting for him to reveal the full extent of the conspiracy." Wells found his voice. "Sir, are you saying this was all planned?" "Operation Whisper never ended," Rhodes replied. "It just went underground. Agent Mitchell, Raven, has been working deep cover to identify everyone involved in the weapons sales and the subsequent cover-up." Parker stared at Sabrina with new understanding. "You've been investigating this for 5 years, while everyone thought you were dead? Death is excellent cover," she replied. "People don't expect dead women to gather evidence against them." Legal consultation regarding Sabrina's situation required intervention from military lawyers specializing in classified operations. Cases like these demanded legal firms with the highest security clearances, capable of accessing sealed files and representing operatives in closed tribunals. Additionally, security clearance training and legal compliance courses for military contractors were becoming increasingly important for protecting warriors' rights. These specialized legal services, operating at the intersection of military justice and national security, ensured that personnel like Sabrina receive proper representation while maintaining operational security for ongoing classified investigations. Morrison was handcuffed now, but he wasn't finished talking. "You have no idea what you're unleashing," he told Rhodes. "The weapon sales were just the beginning. There are operations you don't know about, people in positions you can't imagine." "Actually," Rhodes said, producing a thick file from his briefcase, "we know about all of them. The weapon sales to insurgents, the kickbacks to contractor personnel, the assassination of Afghan officials who were cooperating with American intelligence, the deliberate targeting of Justice Unit when they got too close to the truth." He opened the file, revealing photographs, bank records, and communication transcripts. 5 years of investigation has given us a very complete picture. "Impossible," Morrison breathed. Sabrina spoke up. "You underestimated how much evidence a dead woman could gather. People say remarkable things around someone who officially doesn't exist." Rhodes nodded approvingly. "Agent Mitchell has operated under deep cover for 5 years, gathering evidence while allowing everyone involved to believe they had successfully buried the truth." "But why now?" Wells asked. "Why reveal everything today?" "Because," Rhodes replied, "as of 0800 hours this morning, the last member of the conspiracy was identified and placed under surveillance. The investigation is complete." Parker was still processing the magnitude of what he was learning. "Sir, does this mean Justice Unit is being reactivated?" "Justice Unit never disbanded, Lieutenant Parker. It just became more selective about its visibility." Rhodes turned to address the entire room. "Operation Whisper was officially a failure that resulted in the death of 6 operatives. Unofficially, it was the beginning of one of the most successful counterintelligence operations in military history." "The families," Parker said suddenly, "the memorial services, the grief they've endured, will be addressed," Rhodes assured him. "Full honors will be restored, truths will be told, and justice will be served. But some operations require sacrifices that can't be immediately acknowledged." Sabrina looked at the photograph Wells still had on his computer screen. 6 figures in tactical gear, preparing for a mission that would change all their lives. "Rodriguez, Martinez, Thompson, Chen, and Williams," she said again. "They died believing they were serving their country. They deserve to have their sacrifice acknowledged." "It will be," Rhodes promised. "A memorial service will be held at Arlington National Cemetery next month. Full military honors, with the truth finally told about their service and sacrifice." The truth is finally out, but this story isn't over yet. If you want to see more incredible tales of hidden warriors and military justice, check out our playlist of similar stories. Links in the description, and that next video is already queued up. Morrison was being led away by the MPs, but he managed one final outburst. "This won't end it. There are others, people in positions you can't touch." "We'll see about that," Sabrina said quietly. As the room began to clear, Wells approached Sabrina with obvious respect. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology for everything you've endured today. You were doing your job, Captain. No apology necessary." Parker lingered after the others had gone, studying Sabrina's face as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the memories of a fallen comrade. "I attended your memorial service," he said finally. "I mourned for you." "I know. I was watching from the cemetery perimeter." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. "You were there?" "I needed to see who came, who seemed genuinely affected, and who appeared relieved. It provided valuable intelligence about who might have been involved in the conspiracy." Rhodes consulted his watch. "Agent Mitchell, we have a briefing in 2 hours. Are you ready to come back from the dead officially?" Sabrina looked around the interrogation room, where she had spent the morning being treated as a criminal. The irony wasn't lost on her. "I've been ready for 5 years," she replied. As they prepared to leave, Reynolds approached hesitantly. The sergeant who had been so confident in his mockery hours earlier now looked like a man who had learned a hard lesson about assumptions. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm sorry. I had no idea." Sabrina looked at him for a long moment. "Sergeant Reynolds, you saw what you expected to see. A woman in civilian clothes claiming military credentials. Your mistake wasn't in being suspicious. It was in assuming that suspicion justified disrespect." "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "Do you? Because this same scenario plays out every day. Veterans who don't look the part, service members who don't fit the stereotype, people whose sacrifices aren't immediately visible. The lesson here isn't about me specifically. It's about reserving judgment until you have all the facts. Reynolds nodded, clearly taking the words to heart. Rhodes gathered his materials and headed for the door. Gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is classified at the highest levels. The official story remains that Agent Mitchell died in Afghanistan until we determine the appropriate time for public revelation. Understood, sir, Wells replied for the group. As Sabrina followed Rhodes toward the exit, she paused at the fireplace where her dog tags had been thrown. The metal pieces had cooled now, but they still showed the effects of the heat, cleaned and polished by the flames that were meant to destroy them. Some things, she said, picking up the tags, can't be burned away. Parker watched her secure the tags around her neck, where they belonged. The woman he had mourned for 5 years was alive, had been alive all along, fighting a war that officially didn't exist. "Ma'am," he called out as she reached the door, "will Justice Unit be taking new members?" Sabrina turned back, and for the first time since her arrest, she smiled. "Justice Unit has always been taking new members, Lieutenant. The question is whether they're ready for what the job requires." Rhodes and Sabrina disappeared down the hallway, leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget what they had witnessed. The woman who had walked in as a suspected criminal was walking out as something much more dangerous and valuable, a warrior who had literally returned from the dead to serve justice. But as they reached the main corridor, Sabrina's secure phone buzzed with an incoming encrypted message. She glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened. "Problem?" Rhodes asked. "Intelligence suggests Viper is still alive," she replied, showing him the message. Rhodes went very still. Viper had been Morrison's superior in the conspiracy, the mastermind behind the weapons sales and the order to eliminate Justice Unit. They had assumed he died in a drone strike 6 months earlier. "If Viper is alive," Rhodes said slowly, "then Operation Whisper isn't over." "No," Sabrina agreed, her hand moving unconsciously to the dog tags around her neck. "It's just beginning again." Outside, the Coronado base continued its normal operations, unaware that one of the most significant military justice operations in recent history had just concluded in an interrogation room. But for Sabrina Matthews, also known as Raven of Justice Unit 09, the war was far from over. The truth had been revealed, the conspiracy exposed, and justice served. But in the shadows, other enemies waited. And sometimes, the most dangerous battles were fought by those who had already died once in service to their country. The dog tags around her neck caught the afternoon sunlight as she walked toward whatever came next, a reminder that some flames only made the metal stronger. The secure conference room 3 floors above the interrogation area buzzed with activity as Rhodes led Sabrina through corridors she had never officially seen. Personnel snapped to attention as they passed, word having already spread through the base's communication networks that something extraordinary was happening. "Agent Mitchell," Rhodes said as they entered a room filled with monitors, secure terminals, and communication equipment that belonged in a science fiction movie, "welcome to the real Coronado base." The room was staffed by analysts and technicians whose security clearances made Captain Wells's credentials look elementary. Maps of Afghanistan, Syria, and other conflict zones covered the walls, marked with pins and notation that told stories of ongoing operations most people would never know about. "How long has this been here?" Sabrina asked, studying the sophisticated setup. "Since the day after Operation Whisper officially failed," Rhodes replied. "We knew the conspiracy went deeper than Morrison and his immediate circle. This facility was built to coordinate the investigation while maintaining the fiction that Justice Unit was disbanded." A young analyst approached with a tablet displaying real-time intelligence feeds. "Commander, we've confirmed the Viper signal. Source location appears to be eastern Syria, but the encryption suggests he's using multiple relay points." Rhodes studied the data with the expression of someone who had hoped never to see this particular name again. Viper was supposed to be eliminated 6 months ago. If he's alive and communicating, it means our operation in Damascus was compromised. Sabrina moved to one of the wall maps, her finger tracing routes through Afghanistan and into neighboring countries. "He's been watching us, waiting to see how much we learned before making his next move." "What kind of next move?" the analyst asked. "The kind that makes Operation Whisper look like a training exercise," Sabrina replied grimly. Rhodes activated a secure communication system that connected them with similar facilities around the world. Within minutes, screens lit up with familiar faces, Justice Unit operatives who, like Sabrina, had been officially dead for years. Ghost 2, checking in from Berlin, reported a woman whose face showed the weathering of someone who had spent years in hostile territory. Ghost 4, operational in Seoul, came another voice. One by one, the surviving members of Justice Unit reported their status. Parker, watching from the back of the room, where Rhodes had allowed him to observe, realized that what he had witnessed in the interrogation room was just the tip of an iceberg that stretched around the globe. "How many of you survived the explosion?" he asked quietly. 3 out of 6, Sabrina replied without turning from the monitors. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson didn't make it out, but Williams and Chen have been operating under deep cover for the same 5 years I have. The scope of the operation was staggering. While the world believed Justice Unit had been destroyed, its surviving members had been conducting the largest counterintelligence investigation in modern military history. "Agent Mitchell," Rhodes said, consulting his secure tablet, "intelligence suggests Viper isn't just alive. He's actively recruiting. We're seeing patterns that suggest he's building something new." Building what? A private military corporation with access to classified American weapons and intelligence. Everything Operation Whisper was trying to prevent, but on a scale we never imagined. Sabrina studied the intelligence reports flowing across the monitors. Financial transactions, personnel movements, weapons shipments, all pointing to an organization that operated in the shadows between legitimate military contractors and outright criminal enterprises. He's not just selling weapons anymore, she realized. He's selling entire military units. The implications were terrifying. Private armies equipped with American technology and trained in American tactics, but answerable to no government and bound by no laws except profit. Rhodes nodded grimly, which is why Operation Whisper Phase 2 begins now. Phase 2? The original investigation was about identifying the conspiracy. Phase 2 is about stopping what they built with the profits from their betrayal. A new screen activated, showing a detailed organizational chart that made Sabrina's blood run cold. Viper's organization had tentacles reaching into defense contractors, intelligence agencies, and military commands across multiple continents. "This is bigger than we thought," she said. "Much bigger. And thanks to your 5 years of investigation, we finally have enough evidence to move against all of them simultaneously." Rhodes gestured to the analysts working frantically at their terminals. "In exactly 72 hours, coordinated raids will take place in 14 countries. Every known associate of Viper's organization will be arrested or eliminated." "What about Viper himself?" "That's where you come in. You're the only person who's been inside his network and survived. You know how he thinks, how he operates, what his next move will be." Sabrina felt the weight of 5 years settling on her shoulders. Every day of maintaining her cover, every night of gathering evidence while officially dead, had been leading to this moment. "Where do you need me?" "Syria. Intelligence suggests he's planning something that will make his previous operations look trivial. We need someone on the ground who can get close enough to stop him." Parker stepped forward from his position near the back of the room. "Sir, request permission to accompany Agent Mitchell on this mission." Rhodes looked at him with surprise. "Lieutenant, this isn't a standard military operation. This is deep cover work in hostile territory, with no official support and no backup plan." "With respect, sir, I've already lost my unit once to this conspiracy. I'd like the chance to help finish what they started." Sabrina turned to study Parker's face. She saw determination there, but also something else, the need for closure that came from years of believing his comrades had died in vain. "He knows Justice Unit protocols," she said finally, "and Viper won't expect me to have backup." Rhodes considered the request for a long moment. "Very well, but understand, both of you, that once you enter Syrian territory, you're on your own. If things go wrong, we can't extract you. If you're captured, we can't acknowledge you. You'll be ghosts in the truest sense of the word." "We've been ghosts for 5 years," Sabrina replied. "We're used to it." The next several hours passed in intensive briefing sessions as analysts provided everything they knew about Viper's current operation. The picture that emerged was of a man who had used the profits from his weapons sales to build something unprecedented, a private army that could destabilize entire regions for the right price. "His client list reads like a who's who of international conflict," one analyst reported. "Governments wanting to start wars without official involvement, corporations needing security for illegal operations, criminal organizations requiring military-grade protection." And all of it funded with American taxpayer money, Rhodes added bitterly. Every weapon he sold to insurgents generated profit that went into building this network. Sabrina studied satellite images of Viper's suspected base of operations, a compound in the Syrian desert that looked like a legitimate military installation but operated outside any government oversight. "How many personnel does he have?" she asked. "Current estimates suggest between 200 and 300 highly trained operatives. Most are former special forces from various countries, all with questionable discharges or criminal records." "Mercenaries with nothing to lose," Parker observed. "Exactly. The kind of people who will follow orders without asking questions, as long as the pay is good enough." As the briefing continued, more intelligence flowed in from Justice Unit operatives around the world. The scope of Viper's organization was becoming clearer, and it was more extensive than anyone had imagined. "Agent Mitchell," Rhodes said, "there's something else you need to know. Viper has been specifically hunting for Justice Unit survivors. He knows at least some of you escaped the explosion, and he's been systematically trying to identify and eliminate anyone who might threaten his operation. That explains the increased security around my cover identity over the past few months," Sabrina replied. "I thought it was just normal operational paranoia." "No, he's been closing in. The fact that you maintained your cover long enough to complete the investigation is remarkable." A new alert appeared on one of the monitors, and the analyst monitoring it went pale. "Commander, we're receiving an encrypted transmission directed specifically at Agent Mitchell." "Source?" "Syria. It's using Justice Unit encryption protocols." Rhodes and Sabrina exchanged glances. Only Justice Unit personnel knew those protocols, and all surviving members were accounted for in the current operation. "Put it through," Sabrina said. The voice that came through the speakers was one she recognized, though she had hoped never to hear it again. Viper's tone was cultured, educated, the voice of someone who had once been a respected military officer before greed and ambition corrupted him completely. "Hello, Raven. I trust you're enjoying your resurrection." The room went silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. "I have to admit," Viper continued, "your investigation was more thorough than I expected. Morrison and his associates were useful, but hardly irreplaceable." Sabrina activated her microphone. "Viper, still hiding in the desert, I see." "Hiding? My dear Raven, I'm building. 5 years ago, you and your idealistic colleagues tried to stop a simple weapons transaction. Today, I'm offering something much more valuable, the complete privatization of warfare itself. Selling war to the highest bidder. Providing military solutions to clients who understand that governments move too slowly for modern conflicts. Democracy is inefficient, Raven. Sometimes decisive action requires bypassing official channels." Rhodes was signaling frantically to his analysts, trying to trace the transmission source while keeping Viper talking. "You killed Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson for money," Sabrina said, her voice steady despite the anger burning beneath the surface. "I eliminated obstacles to progress. Their deaths served a greater purpose, funding the research and development of a new model for military operations." "You mean funding your private army?" "I prefer to think of it as a military consulting firm with expanded capabilities." The arrogance in his voice was staggering. Viper spoke about murder and betrayal as if they were business decisions, no different from choosing office supplies or scheduling meetings. "What do you want?" Sabrina asked. "I want to offer you a position. Your skills are remarkable, your dedication impressive. Join my organization, and I can offer you resources the regular military never could. Work for the man who killed my unit. Work for the man who can ensure your considerable talents are properly utilized. Government service is limiting, Raven. Private enterprise offers opportunities for someone of your capabilities." Parker was staring at the speakers in disbelief. Even after everything that had been revealed about Viper's crimes, the man was still trying to recruit the person investigating him. "You're insane," Sabrina said simply. "I'm practical. Governments rise and fall, but skilled professionals adapt. Your Justice Unit was disbanded because it threatened too many powerful interests. My organization exists specifically to serve those same interests. For a price. Everything has a price. The question is whether you are willing to accept reality or cling to idealistic notions about duty and honor." Rhodes had been monitoring the trace attempts, and he finally got the signal he was waiting for. His analysts had identified the transmission source with enough precision to coordinate a response. "Agent Mitchell," he said quietly, "we have a location lock. Multiple military assets are moving into position. But Viper wasn't finished. I know you're tracing this transmission, Commander Rhodes. I'm counting on it. Because in approximately 6 minutes, your military assets are going to discover something very interesting. The monitors in the room lit up with emergency alerts. Intelligence feeds from Syria showed American military personnel approaching Viper's suspected compound. But something was wrong. "Sir," one analyst called out urgently, "those aren't empty buildings they're approaching. Thermal imaging shows significant personnel numbers, and they appear to be in defensive positions." Rhodes grabbed his secure phone, trying to contact the strike team, but was met with communication static. "They're jamming our signals," he realized. Viper's voice came through the speakers again, now with obvious satisfaction. "Your strike team is walking into a demonstration, Commander. I want you to see exactly what my organization is capable of." The satellite feed showed American forces approaching what they believed was Viper's base of operations. But as they drew closer, it became clear they were outnumbered and outgunned by defenders who had been expecting them. "Call them off," Sabrina said urgently. "It's a trap. We can't. Communications are blocked." On the screens, they watched as the American forces found themselves surrounded by hostile personnel using American equipment and tactics. It was like watching American soldiers fight themselves. "This is what I offer my clients," Viper explained conversationally. "Military forces trained to American standards, equipped with American technology, but free from American oversight. Efficient, effective, and completely deniable." The battle was brief, but decisive. Viper's forces used non-lethal weapons to disable the American strike team, demonstrating their superior positioning and tactical awareness without creating an international incident that would draw unwanted attention. "Your people are alive," Viper said as the satellite feed showed American personnel being detained. "I have no interest in creating martyrs, but they'll remain my guests until certain conditions are met." "What conditions?" Rhodes demanded. "Agent Mitchell comes to Syria to discuss my offer in person, alone." The room erupted in protests from multiple personnel, but Sabrina raised her hand for silence. She had expected something like this from the moment Viper's transmission began. "And if I refuse? Then your strike team disappears into the Syrian desert, and my organization demonstrates its capabilities on a larger scale, perhaps a few destabilization operations in areas where American interests are vulnerable." The threat was clear. Viper had the capability to cause significant damage to American operations worldwide, and he was willing to use it to force a confrontation with the person who had spent 5 years investigating him. "I need time to consider," Sabrina said. "You have 12 hours. After that, I begin demonstrating why governments should hire my services instead of relying on their own inadequate military forces." The transmission ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Rhodes turned to face his assembled personnel. "Options, people. How do we extract our people and stop Viper without giving him what he wants?" The analysts worked frantically, but the picture that emerged was grim. Viper's organization was better prepared and more capable than anyone had imagined. A direct military assault would result in significant casualties and international complications. "There is another option," Sabrina said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I go to Syria, but not alone, and not to negotiate. Agent Mitchell, I can't authorize—" "You're not authorizing anything official," she interrupted. "Remember, I'm officially dead. Whatever I do in Syria can't be traced back to the American government." Parker stepped forward. "If she's going, I'm going with her." "It's too dangerous," Viper specifically said alone. Viper said a lot of things, but he also demonstrated that he's overconfident and predictable. He expects me to come alone because that's what a traditional military response would be. He's not expecting a ghost to arrive with backup. Rhodes considered the proposal. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Viper wants to demonstrate his organization's capabilities. Let's give him the opportunity, but instead of fighting his private army directly, we expose what he's really doing to the people who matter most." "Which people?" "His clients. The governments and organizations that hire his services believe they're getting deniable military capability. They don't want to be associated with someone who openly threatens American forces." Sabrina moved to the intelligence displays, pointing to data about Viper's client relationships. "If we can prove he's reckless enough to take American prisoners and threaten government forces, his clients will abandon him faster than he can replace them." "How do we prove that?" "By recording everything he does when I meet with him. Viper's ego won't let him resist explaining exactly how clever he thinks he is. We get him talking, document his threats and his organization's capabilities, then release that information to every government and intelligence service in the world. Rhodes was nodding slowly. Destroy his reputation rather than his forces directly. Exactly. Private military contractors depend on discretion and plausible deniability. If Viper becomes a liability instead of an asset, his own people will turn on him. It's still incredibly dangerous. You'd be walking into a hostile compound with no guarantee of extraction. I've been walking into hostile situations for 5 years. This is just one more. Parker checked his equipment, making sure everything was secured properly. Sir, request permission to accompany Agent Mitchell as backup support. Denied. If she's captured, we need someone who can coordinate rescue operations. Then what's my role in this? Sabrina turned to him with an expression that reminded him why she had been Justice Unit's premier operative. Your role is to make sure the evidence gets out even if I don't make it back. The weight of that responsibility settled on Parker's shoulders. After 5 years of believing his unit had died in vain, he was being asked to ensure their final mission succeeded. Understood, ma'am. Rhodes gathered his senior staff for a final planning session. This operation is completely unofficial. If Agent Mitchell is captured or killed, the United States government has no knowledge of her activities. Is that understood? Yes, sir, came the uniform response. Agent Mitchell, you'll be carrying recording equipment that will transmit everything back to us in real time. If Viper says or does anything that proves his threats to American forces, we'll have evidence to share with his potential clients. What about extraction? If the recording mission succeeds, we'll attempt extraction. If it fails... Rhodes left the sentence unfinished. Sabrina nodded. She had known from the moment she agreed to this mission that it might be one way. Justice Unit personnel were trained to accept those odds. When do I leave? Transport is already prepared. You'll be in Syria within 8 hours. As the briefing concluded and personnel dispersed to their assignments, Parker approached Sabrina privately. Ma'am, there's something I need to say. Go ahead. I spent 5 years believing you and the others had died because of intelligence failures or enemy action. Learning that you were betrayed by our own people, it changes everything. How so? It means Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson didn't die because we failed them. They died because someone sold them out. That's not the same thing. Sabrina studied his face, seeing the struggle he was having with concepts of duty, betrayal, and justice. Lieutenant, the hardest lesson Justice Unit teaches is that good people sometimes die because of other people's bad choices. We can't control those choices, but we can make sure they have consequences. Is that what this mission is about? Consequences? Partly, but it's also about making sure no other units get betrayed the way ours was. Viper's organization represents everything Justice Unit was created to fight against. The corruption of military service for personal gain. Parker nodded, understanding the larger implications of what they were attempting. Ma'am, permission to ask a personal question? Granted. After 5 years of being officially dead, how do you come back to life? How do you rejoin a world that's moved on without you? Sabrina looked around the secure facility that had been built to coordinate her investigation, at the personnel who had dedicated themselves to finding the truth about Operation Whisper. You don't come back to the same life, she said finally. You find a new one. The skills remain, the dedication remains, but everything else has to be rebuilt. Do you regret it, the 5 years underground? I regret that Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson aren't here to see justice served. Everything else was necessary. As Sabrina prepared for what might be her final mission, she thought about the path that had led her from a respected Justice Unit operative to a woman officially dead, then to someone preparing to walk into a hostile compound to confront the man who had destroyed her life. The scales of justice tattooed on her arm had been more than decoration. They had been a promise that wrongs would be balanced, that betrayal would have consequences, that justice would eventually be served, even if it took years to accomplish. Now, as she checked her equipment one final time, that promise was about to be fulfilled. The transport aircraft was a military variant designed for covert insertion, equipped with stealth technology that would allow it to penetrate Syrian airspace without detection. As Sabrina boarded, she carried with her 5 years of investigation, the hopes of her fallen comrades, and the determination to finish what Operation Whisper had started. The flight to Syria passed in relative silence, broken only by periodic updates from the command centers and final equipment checks. As they approached the drop zone, Sabrina could see the Syrian desert stretching endlessly below, hiding secrets and conflicts that most of the world would never know about. "Agent Mitchell," came Rhodes's voice through her secure communication system. "You're approaching the insertion point. Final status check." "All systems operational," she replied. "Recording equipment active, backup communications functional, extraction beacon ready. Remember, your primary mission is intelligence gathering. Get Viper talking, document his threats and capabilities, then extract if possible." "Understood." "And Agent Mitchell, good hunting." The aircraft dropped to low altitude, preparing for the covert insertion that would put Sabrina within striking distance of Viper's compound. Below, the Syrian desert held its secrets close, but not for much longer. As the jump light turned green and Sabrina prepared to leap into hostile territory, she thought about Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson. Their sacrifice had started this investigation, and their memory would see it finished. The scales of justice demanded balance, and after 5 years, that balance was finally about to be restored. Sabrina jumped into the darkness, carrying with her the promise the Justice Unit had made to protect those who couldn't protect themselves from those who saw them only as profit margins. In the Syrian desert below, a reckoning 5 years in the making was about to begin. The parachute deployment was smooth and silent, bringing her down in the predetermined landing zone 3 kilometers from Viper's compound. The Syrian night was surprisingly cold, a sharp contrast to the scorching heat that would come with sunrise. Sabrina quickly buried her parachute and began the approach to the compound, using terrain features and darkness to mask her movement. The recording equipment was functioning perfectly, transmitting everything back to the command center, where Parker and the analysis team were monitoring her progress. "Ghost 7 to base," she whispered into her microphone. "Approaching target. Visual on compound perimeter." "Copy, Ghost 7. Recording transmission clear. Proceed when ready." Viper's compound was more impressive up close than satellite images had suggested. It was a legitimate military installation in everything but official recognition, with defensive positions, communication arrays, and housing for several hundred personnel. "Base, this isn't just a private military contractor," Sabrina reported. "This is a fully operational military base with capabilities that rival some government installations." "Copy that. Continue surveillance." As Sabrina worked her way closer to the compound's main entrance, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 5 years of living as someone else, 5 years of gathering evidence piece by piece, 5 years of being officially dead while fighting for justice. The scales of justice tattooed on her arm caught the moonlight as she moved through the Syrian darkness, a reminder of the promise she had made to her fallen comrades. Tonight, that promise would finally be kept. Viper was waiting somewhere inside that compound, confident in his power and convinced of his invincibility, but he was about to learn that some debts could never be escaped, and some ghosts never stayed buried. Justice was coming to the Syrian desert, carried by a woman who had already died once in service to her country, and was prepared to do so again if necessary. The final confrontation of Operation Whisper was about to begin. As Sabrina approached the compound's main gate, she could see guards in positions that confirmed Viper's military discipline and training standards. These weren't casual mercenaries. They were professional soldiers who had simply chosen a different employer. "Ghost 7 to base, requesting permission to proceed with contact." "Permission granted. Remember, primary objective is intelligence gathering." Sabrina emerged from the darkness and walked directly toward the main gate, her hands visible and her approach deliberately non-threatening. The guards reacted with professional alertness, weapons ready but not immediately threatening. "I'm here to see Viper," she announced. "He's expecting me." One of the guards spoke into his communication device, then gestured for her to wait. Within minutes, a vehicle approached from inside the compound, carrying someone Sabrina recognized from intelligence files as one of Viper's senior lieutenants. "Agent Mitchell," the man said as he exited the vehicle, "welcome to our facility. I'm Colonel Harrison, Viper's Chief of Operations." "Colonel Harrison? I assume you're former American military?" "Former is the operative word. We've found more satisfying employment in the private sector." The ride through the compound revealed the full scope of Viper's operation: training facilities, weapons storage, communication centers, and living quarters that could support a small army. This wasn't just a base. It was the headquarters of a military organization that operated outside any government oversight. "Impressive setup," Sabrina observed, making sure her recording equipment captured everything. "We prefer to think of it as efficiency without bureaucratic interference," Harrison replied. "Government military operations are hampered by oversight committees, budget constraints, and political considerations. Private military operations can focus entirely on mission accomplishment and profit. Profit is what allows us to maintain standards that government forces can't match. Our personnel are paid well, equipped with the best available technology, and trained to levels that most national militaries can't afford." They arrived at a building that served as both headquarters and residence for Viper himself. The architecture was modern and efficient, but with touches of luxury that spoke to the financial success of the organization. Harrison led Sabrina through corridors lined with awards, photographs, and memorabilia from military operations around the world. It was clear that Viper wanted visitors to understand the scope and success of his operations. "He's in the main conference room," Harrison said, stopping before a set of reinforced doors. "Be aware that this conversation is being recorded for security purposes." "Of course it is," Sabrina replied, knowing that her own recording equipment would capture everything from a different perspective. The conference room was dominated by a large table, surrounded by chairs that had clearly hosted many important meetings. Maps covered the walls, showing ongoing operations in multiple countries, and communication equipment provided real-time contact with operatives around the world. Viper stood with his back to the door, studying a map of Syria that showed tactical positions and movement patterns. He was smaller than Sabrina had expected, but his bearing and confidence filled the room. "Agent Mitchell," he said without turning around. "Raven, the ghost who wouldn't stay buried. Viper, the traitor who won't admit what he is." He turned then, and Sabrina found herself facing a man who looked more like a corporate executive than a military commander. His hair was silver, his clothes expensive, and his manner that of someone accustomed to getting his way through charm rather than force. "Traitor is such an ugly word," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I prefer to think of myself as someone who recognized the limitations of government service and found a more effective alternative. You murdered American soldiers for money. I eliminated obstacles to a more efficient system of military operations. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson were investigating activities that would have disrupted important business relationships." The casual way he spoke about murdering her unit members was chilling, but Sabrina kept her expression neutral while her recording equipment captured every word. Important to whom? To clients who understand that modern conflicts require modern solutions. Governments move too slowly, bureaucrats interfere with operational efficiency, and political considerations prevent necessary actions. Viper activated a wall display that showed a world map marked with his organization's operations. The scope was staggering. Active missions on every continent except Antarctica. "This is what 5 years of proper business development achieves," he continued proudly. "Military solutions delivered efficiently and discreetly to clients who value results over process." "You mean you'll fight anyone's war for the right price?" "I provide military consulting services to clients whose interests align with regional stability and economic development." "What about the American soldiers you're currently holding prisoner?" Viper's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his tone. "They're not prisoners. They're guests who are learning about the advantages of private military operations over government alternatives. By being held against their will in a foreign country, by observing firsthand how professional military forces operate when freed from bureaucratic constraints." Sabrina could hear the arrogance in his voice, the absolute confidence that his actions were justified by his results. It was exactly what Rhodes had hoped for. Viper explaining his philosophy and methods in detail. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "Your operation, your capabilities. If you want to recruit me, I need to understand what I'd be joining." Viper smiled with obvious satisfaction. "I was hoping you'd ask." He led her from the conference room through corridors that revealed the full sophistication of his organization. Computer centers with encryption capabilities that rivaled government installations, weapons storage areas with equipment from multiple countries, and training facilities where personnel practiced with military precision. "Our personnel come from the best military units in the world," Viper explained, as they watched soldiers training in close quarters combat. American Special Forces, British SAS, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli commandos, the cream of military excellence, freed from the limitations of national service. You mean mercenaries with questionable discharges? I mean professionals who understand that loyalty should be earned rather than demanded. We pay our people well, equip them properly, and trust them to accomplish missions without micromanagement. They continued the tour, with Viper proudly displaying the capabilities he had built over 5 years of operation. Communication systems that could coordinate operations worldwide, financial networks that moved money invisibly across international boundaries, and intelligence-gathering capabilities that some governments would envy. "This is impressive," Sabrina admitted, making sure her recording equipment captured everything. "But it's also completely illegal under international law." International law is a collection of agreements between governments that have little relevance to private enterprise, Viper replied dismissively. "We operate in areas where government forces are ineffective or unwelcome. We provide stability where chaos would otherwise reign. You provide violence for profit. We provide solutions to complex problems that traditional diplomacy can't address." As the tour continued, Sabrina began to understand the full scope of what Viper had built. This wasn't just a private military company. It was an alternative to government military forces entirely, complete with its own command structure, logistics network, and operational philosophy. "The American prisoners," she said as they approached another section of the compound. "I'd like to see them." "Of course. I want you to understand that we treat even hostile personnel with professional courtesy." The detention area was clean and well-maintained, more like a military barracks than a prison. The captured American soldiers were being held in comfortable conditions, though clearly under guard. "As you can see," Viper said, "we maintain civilized standards even with uninvited guests." One of the American soldiers recognized Sabrina and started to speak, but she made a subtle gesture for silence. Her presence here needed to remain covert until the recording mission was complete. "They look well treated," she observed. "We have no interest in creating international incidents. These soldiers were captured to demonstrate our capabilities, not to torture or execute. They'll be released unharmed once certain conditions are met." "What conditions?" "Recognition that private military forces can operate more efficiently than government alternatives. Acknowledgement that some conflicts require solutions that official channels can't provide." As they left the detention area, Sabrina's secure communication device vibrated with an incoming priority message. She glanced at it discreetly and saw an alert from the command center. Multiple client governments withdrawing contracts. Viper's reputation damaged by recorded threats. Rhodes and his team were already using the intelligence she was gathering to undermine Viper's business relationships. The plan was working, but it would take time to have full effect. "You seem distracted," Viper observed. "I'm processing everything I've seen. This is larger than I expected." "It's larger than most people can imagine. We've moved beyond simple military contracting into comprehensive security solutions for global clients." They returned to the conference room, where Viper activated communication systems that connected them with operatives around the world. One by one, status reports came in from active missions, each demonstrating the global reach of his organization. "Berlin operation completed successfully," reported one operative. "Target eliminated, no official involvement detected." "Damascus security contract renewed," came another report. "Government forces successfully replaced with private alternatives." "Financial transfers completed from 3 new clients," reported a third voice. "Authorization to proceed with African operations confirmed." Sabrina listened to each report, her recording equipment capturing evidence of activities that would interest law enforcement agencies worldwide. The scope of Viper's organization was becoming clear. This was a completely parallel military structure, operating outside any government oversight. "Impressive coordination," she said. "Efficiency through proper management," Viper replied. "Government forces waste enormous resources on oversight, committee reviews, and political considerations. Private forces can focus entirely on mission accomplishment. What about accountability?" "Accountability to our clients, who judge us based on results rather than process. If we fail to deliver, they hire someone else. The market provides better oversight than any government bureaucracy." As the demonstration continued, Sabrina's secure device continued to vibrate with updates from the command center. More clients were withdrawing contracts, More governments were launching investigations, and more intelligence agencies were requesting information about Viper's operations. The recording mission was succeeding beyond expectations, but Sabrina knew that Viper would eventually realize what was happening. When he did, the situation would become significantly more dangerous. "Agent Mitchell," Viper said, settling back in his chair, "you've seen our capabilities and our philosophy. What's your assessment?" "You've built something unprecedented," she replied honestly. "A private military force with capabilities that rival some government armies. And you've done it by betraying your oath as an American military officer, murdering your fellow soldiers, and selling your services to anyone willing to pay your price." The room went very quiet. Viper's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the atmosphere that suggested Sabrina had finally pushed beyond his tolerance for criticism. "I see. You're not here to join our organization. I'm here to finish what Operation Whisper started 5 years ago." Viper activated a control that sealed the conference room doors and disabled the standard communication systems. Unknown to him, Sabrina's specialized recording equipment continued to function. "Agent Mitchell, I'm disappointed. I had hoped you would be pragmatic enough to recognize opportunity when it was offered. I recognize opportunity. The opportunity to bring you to justice for betraying your country and murdering my unit. Your unit was eliminated because they threatened business relationships that have since generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Their deaths funded research and development that has revolutionized private military operations. Their deaths were murder. Their deaths were business decisions made by people who understood the larger strategic picture." Viper stood and walked to a wall safe, from which he withdrew a thick file folder. "Since you're not interested in joining our organization, perhaps you'd be interested in learning exactly how thoroughly we've investigated yours." He spread photographs and documents across the conference table. Images of Sabrina's movements over the past 5 years, records of her investigations, and intelligence about Justice Unit operations that should have been completely classified. "We've known about your activities for some time," he continued. "Your investigation has been quite thorough, but hardly secret from people with the right intelligence capabilities." Sabrina studied the documents, realizing with growing alarm that Viper had been tracking her investigation almost from the beginning. "How?" she asked. "The same way we learned about Operation Whisper in the first place. We have sources inside the American intelligence community who keep us informed about activities that might affect our business interests." The implications were staggering. If Viper had sources inside American intelligence, then the corruption went far deeper than Morrison and his immediate associates. "Who?" Viper smiled. "That information has significant value. I might be willing to trade it for certain considerations." "What kind of considerations?" "Your agreement to cease investigative activities and accept permanent employment with our organization. Your skills would be valuable, and your knowledge of Justice Unit procedures would help us improve our operational security." Sabrina's secure device vibrated again, this time with an emergency alert. "Extraction team moving to position. Prepare for immediate extraction if possible." Rhodes and his team had apparently decided that the intelligence gathering mission had been successful enough to warrant attempting a rescue. But Sabrina wasn't ready to leave yet, not when Viper was about to reveal the extent of his infiltration into American intelligence. "You want me to betray my country the same way you did. I want you to recognize that your country has already betrayed you. You've been officially dead for 5 years while conducting an investigation that your own government can't officially acknowledge. You've risked everything for people who will disavow your existence if it becomes politically convenient." There was enough truth in his words to sting. Sabrina had indeed sacrificed 5 years of her life for an investigation that would have to remain largely secret, regardless of its success. "The sources," she pressed. "Who in American intelligence is working for you?" Viper consulted his watch, then activated a communication system that connected him with his security forces. "Perimeter alert," he announced. "We have incoming aircraft approaching from the northwest. Probably an extraction attempt for our guest." He turned back to Sabrina. "It appears our conversation is about to be interrupted. How unfortunate." Sabrina's extraction beacon was still secure, but she realized that activating it now would mean leaving without the most important intelligence, the identity of Viper's sources inside the American government. "Give me the names," she said. "Then I'll consider your offer." "Agent Mitchell, I think you misunderstand your situation. You're currently in a heavily defended compound in hostile territory, surrounded by several hundred professional soldiers who follow my orders without question. You're not in a position to make demands. I'm in a position to make this entire compound disappear in approximately 10 minutes, she replied calmly. Viper raised an eyebrow. Explain. The extraction team approaching your position isn't coming to rescue me. They're coming to eliminate your entire operation with extreme prejudice. I'm the only thing keeping them from turning this place into a crater. It was a bluff, but a convincing one based on the military assets that Rhodes had demonstrated earlier. Interesting, and what would prevent me from simply eliminating you now and dealing with the extraction team separately? Because killing me would confirm everything I've recorded about your operation and your threats to American forces. It would also eliminate any possibility of negotiating a peaceful resolution. Viper considered this for a moment, then activated his communication system again. All units, defensive positions, prepare for possible hostile contact, but do not engage unless directly threatened. He turned back to Sabrina. Very well. You have approximately 8 minutes to convince me that cooperation serves both our interests. Start with the names of your American sources. Colonel Michael Stevens, Defense Intelligence Agency. Major Sarah Thompson, CIA Liaison to Special Operations Command. Captain David Rodriguez, NSA Communications Security. Sabrina felt her blood run cold. Those were names from the highest levels of American intelligence. People with access to the most sensitive operational information. How long have they been working for you? Stevens since 2016. Thompson since 2018. Rodriguez is more recent. We recruited him last year. Why? Money, primarily. We pay considerably better than government salaries, but also ideology. They believe private military forces can operate more efficiently than government alternatives. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Viper hadn't just corrupted a few officers in Afghanistan. He had systematically infiltrated American intelligence at the highest levels. What information have they provided? Everything we needed to stay ahead of official investigations. Personnel assignments, operational plans, intelligence assessments. They have been quite thorough. Sabrina's recording equipment was capturing everything, but she realized that some of this intelligence was too sensitive to trust to electronic transmission. She would need to survive the extraction to ensure it reached the right people. Agent Mitchell, Viper continued, I hope you understand why your investigation was doomed from the beginning. We've known about every move Justice Unit has made for years. Then why haven't you eliminated the other survivors? Because they serve our purposes. Williams and Chen have been conducting operations that remove potential competitors while believing they're fighting corruption. Ghost 2 in Berlin eliminated 3 rival private military contractors in the past year. Ghost 4 in Seoul disrupted several arms dealing networks that competed with our operations. The revelation was devastating. Justice Unit's surviving members hadn't been fighting corruption. They had been unknowingly working for the very organization they thought they were investigating. You've been using us. I've been employing your services through intermediaries. Your colleagues believe they're conducting Justice Unit operations, but they're actually eliminating my business competitors. Sabrina felt the room spinning around her. 5 years of investigation, 5 years of believing she was fighting for justice, and it had all been manipulation by the man she was trying to stop. The extraction team, she said weakly, is probably legitimate. Your handler Rhodes appears to be clean, though somewhat naive about the extent of our intelligence capabilities. Viper consulted his watch again. 4 minutes until they reach optimal striking distance. I suggest we conclude our negotiations quickly. What do you want? Your agreement to work for our organization, with full knowledge of who we are and what we do. No more illusions about government service or Justice Unit missions, just honest employment with people who understand that the world runs on practical considerations rather than idealistic principles. Sabrina activated her extraction beacon, sending a signal that would bring Rhodes's team directly to her location. My answer is no. I was afraid you might say that. Viper activated another control, and armed guards entered the conference room from concealed positions. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved with the precision of special operations personnel and carried weapons that could stop any resistance attempt. Agent Mitchell, you're now officially a prisoner of war, though the war you're fighting doesn't officially exist. Rhodes will come for me. Rhodes will try, but he's operating with incomplete intelligence in hostile territory against forces that know exactly what he's planning. Sabrina realized she had walked into a trap more sophisticated than anything she had imagined. Viper hadn't just been confident about his ability to handle her investigation. He had been planning this confrontation for months. "The recording equipment I've been carrying," she said. "You know about it." "Of course. We've been feeding your handlers selected information while blocking the intelligence that would actually threaten our operations. Then everything I've transmitted has been carefully controlled to provide the illusion of successful intelligence gathering while revealing nothing truly damaging." The magnitude of the deception was overwhelming. Not only had Viper been using Justice Unit operatives to eliminate his competitors, he had been controlling their investigation from the beginning. Outside the conference room, the sound of approaching aircraft grew louder. Rhodes's extraction team was arriving, but they were walking into a situation they didn't understand. "Agent Mitchell," Viper said, "I'm going to offer you one final opportunity. Join our organization willingly, and I'll ensure your extraction team withdraws safely. Refuse, and I'll demonstrate why government forces can't match private military capabilities." Sabrina looked around the conference room, taking in the maps, communication equipment, and armed guards. Everything she had believed about her mission, her investigation, and her chances of stopping Viper had been built on manipulated information. But one thing remained true. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson had died because of this man's greed and ambition. That fact couldn't be manipulated or controlled. "My answer is still no." Viper nodded sadly. "I was hoping you would be more practical." He activated his communication system. "All units, the extraction team is now considered hostile. Eliminate them." The sound of gunfire erupted outside the compound as Viper's forces engaged Rhodes's team. Through the conference room windows, Sabrina could see muzzle flashes and explosions as a battle began in the Syrian desert. "Agent Mitchell, you now have a choice. Help me coordinate the defeat of your extraction team, or watch them die while you remain helpless to assist them." Sabrina closed her eyes, thinking about the path that had led her to this moment. 5 years of investigation, 5 years of believing she was fighting for justice, 5 years of planning for a confrontation that had been orchestrated by her enemy from the beginning. But even if everything else had been manipulation, even if Viper had been controlling her investigation and using her colleagues, one truth remained unchanged. Justice required that he face consequences for his actions. "There's a third option," she said quietly. "Which is?" Sabrina opened her eyes and looked directly at Viper. "I stop you here and now, regardless of the cost. Agent Mitchell, you're surrounded by armed guards in a heavily defended compound. What exactly do you think you can accomplish?" "Justice." Sabrina moved with the speed and precision that had made her Justice Unit's premier operative. Her first target was the communication system that Viper was using to coordinate his forces. A single precisely placed strike disabled the primary control panel and sent electronic feedback through the entire network. The guards reacted quickly, but Sabrina had anticipated their response. Using the conference table as cover and the room's layout to her advantage, she created enough chaos to reach the secondary communication system. "Stop her!" Viper shouted, but his words were lost in the sounds of combat both inside and outside the conference room. Sabrina's second strike disabled the backup communications, cutting Viper off from his forces at the critical moment when coordination was essential. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified as Rhodes's extraction team pressed their attack. "You can't escape," Viper said, drawing his own weapon. "Even if you disable my communications, there are 300 professional soldiers between you and safety." "I'm not trying to escape," Sabrina replied. "I'm trying to finish what Operation Whisper started." She produced a device from her equipment that Viper hadn't detected during his security screenings, a specialized transmitter that connected directly to military satellite networks. With the push of a button, she activated a signal that would be received by intelligence agencies worldwide. "What is that?" "Everything you've told me about your sources in American intelligence, your operations worldwide, and your threats to government forces. But this transmission isn't going through your monitored networks." Viper's face went pale as he realized the implications. "That's impossible. We control all communication from this compound. You control terrestrial communications. Military satellites are a different matter." The sound of explosions grew closer as Rhodes's team fought their way toward the conference room. Viper's forces were well-trained and well-equipped, but they were facing American Special Operations personnel who had come to extract one of their own. "Agent Mitchell," Viper said desperately, "you've just destroyed both our organizations. The intelligence you are transmitting will expose Justice Unit as thoroughly as it exposes my operations." Justice Unit was already exposed. Your sources in American intelligence made sure of that, but now everyone will know why. The conference room doors exploded inward as Rhodes's team reached their objective. The battle outside was still raging, but a path had been cleared to Sabrina's location. "Agent Mitchell!" Rhodes's voice came through the smoke and debris. "Time to go!" But Viper wasn't finished. As Sabrina moved toward the extraction team, he raised his weapon for one final act of spite. "If I can't recruit you," he said, "then no one can have you." The shot that followed echoed through the conference room, but it wasn't Viper who fired. Parker had appeared from the extraction team and put 3 rounds center mass into the man who had orchestrated Operation Whisper and manipulated Justice Unit for 5 years. "Lieutenant Parker," Sabrina said with genuine surprise, "I thought you were staying at base." "With respect, ma'am, I wasn't going to let you finish this mission alone." Viper collapsed against the conference table, his expression shifting from confident control to the confusion of a man who had just realized that all his careful planning had been undone by simple determination. This doesn't end anything," he gasped. "My organization will continue. My sources will remain in place. You've won a battle, not the war." "Maybe," Sabrina replied, kneeling beside him. "But Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson are finally avenged. That's enough for now." Viper died with those words in his ears, the man who had corrupted military service for personal gain finally facing the consequences of his actions. "Agent Mitchell," Rhodes said urgently, "we need to extract immediately. This compound is about to be overrun by Syrian government forces responding to the battle." As they fought their way back through the compound toward the extraction aircraft, Sabrina reflected on the mission that had consumed 5 years of her life. Viper was dead, his immediate organization disrupted, and evidence of the conspiracy had been transmitted to intelligence agencies worldwide. But the deeper corruption he had revealed, the sources inside American intelligence, the manipulation of Justice Unit operations, the systematic exploitation of military service for private gain, those problems would take years to address. The extraction aircraft lifted off from the Syrian desert as government forces closed in on the compound. Below, Viper's private army was scattering, their command structure broken and their leader dead. "Agent Mitchell," Rhodes said over the aircraft's communication system, "preliminary reports suggest your transmission was successful. Intelligence agencies in 14 countries are already launching investigations based on the information you provided. What about the American sources Viper mentioned? Already under arrest, Stevens, Thompson, and Rodriguez were taken into custody the moment your transmission was received." The speed of the response was encouraging, but Sabrina knew that corruption this extensive didn't end with the arrest of a few individuals. "There will be others," she said. "Probably. But this operation has given us tools to find them." As the aircraft carried them away from Syria and toward safety, Sabrina thought about the Justice Unit operatives who had unknowingly been working for Viper's organization. Williams and Chen would need to be extracted and debriefed, their operations reviewed to understand the full extent of the manipulation. "Commander," she said, "what happens to Justice Unit now?" "Justice Unit continues," Rhodes replied, "but with better oversight and more careful vetting of intelligence sources. This operation has taught us valuable lessons about the vulnerabilities of black operations." Parker, sitting across from Sabrina in the aircraft, finally asked the question that had been bothering him since the mission began. "Ma'am, when you realized that Viper had been manipulating your investigation from the beginning, why didn't you abort the mission?" Sabrina looked at him with the expression of someone who had learned hard lessons about duty and justice. "Because sometimes the mission isn't about what you think you're accomplishing. Sometimes it's about what you're actually willing to sacrifice to serve something larger than yourself. Even when you're being manipulated, especially then." Viper thought he could control Justice Unit by feeding us selected information and letting us eliminate his competitors. But he made one mistake, which was, he forgot that real justice doesn't depend on having complete information or perfect understanding. It depends on being willing to act when action is required, regardless of the personal cost. The aircraft continued its flight towards safety, carrying with it the conclusion of Operation Whisper and the beginning of a new phase in the fight against military corruption. Below, the Syrian desert held its secrets a little less closely, and around the world, intelligence agencies began the work of cleaning house. But for Sabrina Matthews, also known as Raven of Justice Unit 09, the mission was finally complete. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson had been avenged, their sacrifice acknowledged, and their memory honored by the pursuit of justice against impossible odds. The scales of justice tattooed on her arm had finally found their balance. As the aircraft crossed into friendly airspace and the immediate danger passed, Sabrina allowed herself to think about what came next. 5 years of being officially dead had ended, but the transition back to official existence would be complex and challenging. "Agent Mitchell," Rhodes said, "there's something else you should know. The President has authorized full restoration of your military status and rank. You'll be receiving the Medal of Honor for your service during Operation Whisper." "What about the other Justice Unit members?" "Full honors for all of them. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson will be interred at Arlington National Cemetery with complete military honors. Williams and Chen are being extracted and will receive recognition for their service as well." The recognition was important, but it couldn't bring back the 5 years she had lost or the comrades who had died. Still, it represented acknowledgement that their sacrifice had meaning beyond the immediate mission. "There's also been a request," Rhodes continued, "from several allied intelligence services for your consultation on similar corruption investigations. It appears that Viper's organization had connections to private military contractors worldwide. More missions? If you're willing, your expertise in this area is now unmatched, and there's clearly more work to be done." Sabrina considered the offer. Part of her wanted nothing more than to retire from operations and find some quiet corner of the world where she could live a normal life. But another part recognized that the fight against military corruption was far from over. "What about Justice Unit?" "Justice Unit is being reconstituted with improved oversight and security protocols. We'd like you to lead the new organization." The offer was both an honor and a burden. Leading Justice Unit would mean accepting responsibility for operations like the one that had consumed the past 5 years of her life. It would mean training new operatives, planning missions that couldn't be officially acknowledged, and making decisions that would affect people's lives in ways they might never understand. But it would also mean ensuring that future generations of military personnel wouldn't face the kind of betrayal that had destroyed her original unit. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. The offer will remain open." As the aircraft approached its destination, Sabrina reflected on the journey that had brought her from a routine investigation in Afghanistan to a confrontation in the Syrian desert. The path had been longer and more complex than anyone could have anticipated, but justice had ultimately been served. The scales of justice tattooed on her arm caught the light from the aircraft window, a reminder of the promise she had made and kept. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Thompson could finally rest in peace, knowing that their sacrifice had led to the downfall of the man who had betrayed them. But as the aircraft touched down and Sabrina prepared to return to the world of the living, she knew that the fight for justice was never truly finished. There would always be people who tried to corrupt military service for personal gain, always be conspiracies that threatened the integrity of the institutions designed to protect society. The question was whether there would always be people willing to stand against them, regardless of the personal cost. As Sabrina walked down the aircraft's ramp and back into official existence, she carried with her the knowledge that justice, however delayed, however complex, however dangerous to pursue, remained possible as long as people were willing to fight for it. The scales of justice demanded balance, and sometimes that balance could only be restored by those willing to sacrifice everything in its pursuit. Operation Whisper was finally complete, but the mission of justice continued. And in the Syrian desert, where a private military compound lay in ruins, the wind carried the ashes of corruption and betrayal across the sand, while somewhere in the distance, new challenges waited for those brave enough to face them. Justice delayed is not justice denied, and some flames only make the metal stronger. The war against military corruption would continue, but now it had warriors who understood both its methods and its cost. The scales of justice had found their balance, and the price of that balance had been measured in blood, sacrifice, and the unwavering determination to serve something greater than personal interest. In the end, that was what Justice Unit had always been about. Not the operations they conducted or the enemies they faced, but the principle that some things were worth dying for, and that justice, however long delayed, would eventually find its way. The Syrian desert held its secrets a little less closely, and the world was a little more just for the sacrifice of those who had paid its price.